Black Belt asked a black janitor to spar for fun. What happened next left everyone speechless. The fluorescent lights above the university gym buzzed with that faint electric hum that somehow always made people feel both alive and slightly irritated at the same time. It was the kind of place where ego filled the space almost as heavily as sweat. Young athletes shadowboxed in the mirrors, stretching limbs that still believed they were immortal, while trainers barked commands as if every punch thrown could rewrite a destiny. It was just after 5 p.m. on a Wednesday when Jace Tanner, campus golden boy and third-degree black belt in Taekwondo, wrapped up his usual sparring session with a bruised but loyal friend. Jace stood tall, shirtless, muscles glistening, confidence practically radiating off him like steam from a kettle. His group, mostly fellow martial arts students, a few girls from the dance department, and one or two eager onlookers, gathered around him, hanging on every word like he was some kind of warrior poet. And then, in the middle of the polished floor, Jace spun suddenly toward the far corner of the gym. "Hey!" he called, pointing toward the janitor. The room turned. There he was, the man who was always there but never seen, pushing a mop, slow and steady. His navy jumpsuit clean but faded, shoes scuffed with years of tread. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, tall and lean but slightly hunched like someone who had learned to shrink himself to avoid notice. His name tag simply read, Malcolm. Jace grinned as if he'd just discovered a secret level in a video game. "Malcolm, right? You ever sparred before?" The janitor looked up, slow and measured. His face, smooth but lined with quiet wisdom, revealed no surprise, no offense. Just that calm, unbothered neutrality worn by people who had learned the power of silence. "I've had some experience," Malcolm said evenly, not breaking stride. Jace laughed, a short burst that made the others chuckle too. "Come on," Jace said. "Just for fun. I promise I won't go hard on you." Someone from the crowd whispered, "This is going to be hilarious." Malcolm paused, leaned on the mop handle, and looked the young man square in the eyes. "You sure you want to do this?" Jace rolled his shoulders, bouncing on his toes. "Oh, I'm sure. We've got mats. You won't get hurt, old man." The words hung in the air. Malcolm set the mop aside and walked toward the circle, his movements fluid, unhurried, like he wasn't walking into something, but through it. The gym hushed. Jace tossed him a pair of gloves, which Malcolm caught without looking. The gloves were too new for his calloused hands. They looked strange on him, like someone putting chrome rims on an old Ford pickup, odd but somehow elegant. "You ever done Taekwondo?" Jace asked, bouncing lightly. Malcolm simply said, "A few arts. Long time ago." The two circled each other. Jace's eyes danced, full of performance and edge. Malcolm's, still, unmoving, studying. It began slowly, a few feints, a couple of probing jabs. Jace was fast, no question. He was young, confident, trained. His technique was sharp, his form disciplined. Every motion seemed polished by hours of practice. But Malcolm, he moved like water flowing around stone. Effortless, controlled, unpredictable. The first time he deflected a kick with nothing but a shift of his weight and a flick of the wrist, the crowd murmured. The second time, when he slid under a spinning heel kick and tapped Jace gently on the ribs, they went quiet. After 30 seconds, the tone changed. Jace's grin faded. His footwork grew tighter. He stopped showboating and started fighting. Malcolm didn't flinch. He moved like someone who didn't fear pain, like someone who had long since stopped proving anything to anyone. Another minute passed. Jace launched a flurry of strikes. Sharp jabs, two powerful roundhouse kicks. All blocked, dodged, neutralized like wind against stone. Then it happened. Malcolm stepped in, a blur, and in a graceful, almost slow-motion arc, swept Jace's lead foot, twisted gently, and let him fall. Not hard, not brutal, just enough to show him. Jace hit the mat. The room gasped. Silence. Malcolm stepped back and offered a hand. Jace blinked, still on the floor, chest heaving, eyes wide not with pain, but disbelief. Malcolm said, voice calm as dusk, never underestimate a man who cleans the floor you walk on. And then he walked away, back to the corner, back to the mop, as if nothing had ever happened. But in that room, something had changed. The air, the silence, the way people looked at him. The janitor with the mop had just wiped the floor with a champion, and he hadn't even broken a sweat. The next morning, the gym smelled like sweat and chlorine, like it always did. But something about the air felt different. Taut, as though the building itself remembered the quiet storm that had passed through it the night before. By 9 a.m., the story had already made the rounds. Whispers flowed from the weight room to the cafeteria like a spilled protein shake. Messy, fast, and impossible to contain. Did you hear what happened to Jace? Became the unofficial slogan of the day. Students replayed the scene in slow-motion retellings, exaggerating with each version. He flipped Jace like a pancake. Or, dude didn't even blink. Even Coach Rivera had heard. A stern man with a whistle always dangling from his neck. Rivera stood in his office doorway with arms folded across his chest, watching Jace move through the gym with a little less swagger than usual. His confidence, while intact, had been tempered, like a blade reforged in fire. He wasn't broken, but he was bruised, and not just physically. You all right? Asked Devin, Jace's best friend and fellow martial artist. As they laced up their gloves in the locker room, Jace sat on the bench, staring at his hands. Yeah, just thinking, he muttered. Devin chuckled. About how a janitor outclassed you in front of the whole gym? Jace shot him a look. Not angry, not playful. Just honest. That wasn't some random janitor, he said quietly. That man was trained. Not just trained, seasoned. There's a difference. Devin sat down beside him. You think he was military? Maybe. But that's not what's bugging me, Jace said, tightening the strap on his glove. It's the way he moved, like he'd done it all before, like nothing I threw at him mattered. It wasn't luck. Yeah, well, Devin replied, it still had to sting. Jace nodded slowly. It did, but not for the reasons you think. Across campus, in a quiet hallway no one really paid attention to, Malcolm mopped without urgency, headphones in, swaying slightly to the soft jazz playing from his old MP3 player. He wasn't thinking about the sparring match. Not exactly. What he remembered was the moment before it started, the way everyone looked at him like he was some side character suddenly given a line. That familiar flicker of amusement people wore when they thought someone was about to embarrass themselves. He'd seen that look before, years ago in different cities, different gyms, different uniforms. He'd learned not to take it personally. Still, something about this place stuck with him. Maybe it was the boy. That evening, Jace came back. Not with friends. Not with an audience. Just himself. He waited until the gym cleared out, then approached the corner where Malcolm was wiping down a bench press. Hey, Jace said, voice even. Malcolm looked up, nodding once. Evening. Jace stood awkwardly for a moment before speaking. I wanted to say thanks. For yesterday. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Thanks. Yeah. For humbling me without humiliating me. Malcolm's mouth curved slightly. You're welcome. Jace hesitated. I want to learn. From you. Silence. Then Malcolm set the rag down and looked him square in the eyes. You sure? Jace nodded. Not just about fighting. Malcolm added. But about seeing, about listening, about losing well. Jace took a breath. Yes. Malcolm smiled. Not wide. Just enough. Be here tomorrow. Before sunrise. No spectators. As Jace walked away, he felt something shift in him. The ego untangling from his shoulders, the arrogance shrinking into purpose. Whatever this janitor had been in his past life, teacher, fighter, monk, soldier, one thing was clear now. He hadn't just come to mop floors. He had come to remind people what mastery really looked like. It was still dark when Jace arrived. The moon hung low over the campus gym, casting soft shadows on the dew-covered pavement. The sky above was ink blue, and the silence was so thick you could almost feel it pressing against your skin. Jace stood by the entrance in a hoodie and track pants, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, and a mixture of nerves and anticipation fluttering in his chest like restless birds. Inside, the gym was lit by only a few side lamps, the air cool and quiet. The echo of Jace's footsteps felt louder than usual as he stepped onto the mat. Malcolm was already there. He wasn't wearing his janitor uniform. Instead, he stood barefoot in black cotton pants and a fitted long-sleeve shirt. He looked different, taller, more centered. Like this was the version of himself he only brought out before the world woke up. He nodded as Jace approached. "You're early. That's good." Jace placed his bag down, stepped onto the mat, and bowed slightly the way he'd been taught. But Malcolm didn't bow back. Instead, he said, "Before you fight, you have to know who you are without fighting." Jace blinked. "What do you mean?" Malcolm gestured for him to sit. "Stretch. Listen." Jace obeyed, slowly lowering to the mat. Malcolm sat across from him, legs crossed, hands resting on his knees, breathing steady. "For a lot of people," Malcolm began, "martial arts is about control over others, over chaos, over pain. But the best fighters I ever knew weren't the ones who could throw the hardest punch or kick the highest. They were the ones who could stay still the longest." Jace shifted slightly, unsure whether to ask a question or just absorb it. "Stillness is the skill most young men forget," Malcolm continued. "They think power is movement, but power is in choosing when not to move." Jace nodded slowly. "So, you're gonna teach me how to be still?" Malcolm cracked the faintest smile. "Eventually. But first, let's find out what you already know." They sparred. Not like before, not a match, not a show. It was slower, more deliberate. Malcolm moved like a mirror, responding with minimal effort, guiding Jace into positions where he was forced to adapt. Every time Jace relied on muscle, Malcolm dissolved it with balance. Every time he pressed forward too eagerly, Malcolm redirected him off course. "You think too loud," Malcolm said, sidestepping a kick with a graceful pivot. "I'm trying to stay focused," Jace muttered between breaths. "Exactly," Malcolm replied. "You're trying. Let it happen. You don't need to dominate the moment. You need to meet it." The words rang in Jace's ears even as sweat dripped from his brow. They sparred for an hour. No music, no timer, just the rhythm of breath, movement, and the squeak of bare feet against rubber mat. By the time they stopped, the first light of morning had begun to pour through the windows. Jace collapsed onto the mat, not out of defeat but exhaustion and clarity. "Water's in the fridge," Malcolm said as he peeled off his gloves. Jace grabbed a bottle and gulped, then asked, "How did you learn all this?" Malcolm paused. For a long moment he said nothing. Then finally, "Life, pain, solitude. I didn't have a dojo when I was young. I had concrete floors, streetlights, and a brother who never came home. I learned by surviving." Jace listened in silence. You think discipline is born in a belt, Malcolm said. But it's not. It's born in choice. Every day, every breath, you either sharpen yourself or you rust. He stood, walked over to his mop, his other life, and said without turning back, "Same time tomorrow." That day at school, Jace moved differently. Not slower, not weaker, just grounded. Even his friends noticed. "You good?" Devin asked during lunch. Jace nodded. "I think so. I'm just learning how to be quiet again." Devin raised an eyebrow. "That janitor really got in your head, huh?" Jace smiled. "He's not a janitor, Dev. He's a teacher who just happens to clean floors." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the gym, Malcolm leaned against the wall during his break, sipping tea from a thermos older than most of the students. One of the custodial staff, a younger man named Terrence, approached him with a smirk. "I heard you're training the black belt now." Malcolm looked at him and nodded. "You planning to open a dojo?" Terrence asked. "No," Malcolm said. "I'm just opening eyes." By the end of the second week, Jace's body ached in places he didn't know had nerve endings. But it was a good kind of ache, the kind that came with purpose, not punishment. The soreness from Malcolm's early morning training wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, and spiritual all at once. Each morning began the same. No greetings, no playlists, no warm-up routines drawn from glossy magazines or viral clips. Just presence, stillness, breath. Malcolm was precise with his instruction, but never rigid. He didn't bark orders, he offered insight. When Jace overextended, Malcolm would gently correct his form with a word or a shift of his hand. When Jace rushed, Malcolm would move slower. When Jace hesitated, Malcolm would stop entirely and wait for him to notice. "You can't force wisdom," Malcolm told him one morning as they stood outside the gym after a rain, water beating on the windows behind them. "You just make yourself ready for when it shows up." Jace had stopped trying to impress him, stopped trying to win. Something deeper had taken root, not submission but reverence. Meanwhile, the student body buzzed. Rumors of Jace's mysterious new trainer reached the martial arts club, the track team, and even the administration. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. Some thought Jace had hired a secret coach. Others suspected he was preparing for a private competition. The truth, however, was quieter than gossip could imagine. It was on a Saturday morning when Coach Rivera approached Malcolm. He stood by the gym doors, arms crossed, squinting in the early sunlight as Malcolm emerged from the building with a rolled-up mat slung over his shoulder. "Morning," the coach said, voice measured. Malcolm nodded. "Coach, I've been hearing about you," Rivera said. "Word gets around." Malcolm adjusted the mat on his shoulder. "I don't chase attention." Rivera studied him. "No, but sometimes attention chases the right people." Pause. "There's a regional martial arts expo next weekend," the coach continued. "We're doing a demonstration, taekwondo, judo, a few showcases. You should come. Maybe bring the kid." Malcolm didn't answer at first. He looked out over the field beyond the gym, where the grass swayed in the wind and a few early joggers passed like shadows. "I don't perform," he said finally. "Not for crowds." "It's not about you," Rivera replied. "It's about him, and he's changing. Fast. And the others, they see it." Malcolm turned back and met the coach's eyes. There was no challenge in his gaze, just understanding. "Let me think about it," he said. Jace was hesitant when Malcolm brought it up later that day. "A demo?" he said, surprised. "In front of people?" Malcolm nodded. Coach asked. "Not for me. For you." "I'm not ready," Jace said, running a hand through his hair. "You're not supposed to be," Malcolm replied. But you're ready to grow. That's enough. They stood in silence. Then Jace said quietly, "What if I mess up?" Malcolm's response was immediate. "Then you'll learn faster." The expo took place in a massive rec center an hour from campus. Folding chairs formed rows in front of a long blue mat flanked by banners and tables filled with brochures, snacks, and trophies. Parents, students, and instructors filled the room. Laughter, sneakers squeaking, the clatter of nunchaku against padded floors. Jace arrived with his duffel bag and nerves jangling like keys in a dryer. Malcolm, calm as ever, walked beside him, not saying much, just anchoring the moment with his presence. When it was time, Jace stepped onto the mat. Malcolm followed. There were no introductions, no grand announcement, just movement. They began with basic sequences, blocks, footwork, stances, but even in those simple exchanges, the crowd hushed. Malcolm's timing, Jace's responsiveness, the invisible thread that connected them. It was more than skill. It was art. And then they sparred. Slow, deliberate, beautiful. Malcolm gave just enough resistance to push Jace toward grace, not aggression. Jace moved with balance and humility, the raw power of youth channeled through something finer. Control. When it ended, there was no applause at first. Just silence. Then a wave of clapping that spread like wind through trees. Back in the locker room, Jace sat on the bench, toweling off. "I didn't expect them to react like that," he said. Malcolm sat beside him, unwrapping his hand wraps. "They didn't clap because you were flashy. They clapped because they felt something." Jace turned to him. "What do I do with that?" Malcolm looked him square in the eye. "You keep showing up, quietly, every day, and you teach others to do the same." Jace nodded. Then he said, "Malcolm, what were you before all this?" Malcolm smiled gently. "I was a fighter who forgot how to be still. Now I'm a janitor who remembers." The following Monday, the school gym buzzed with a quiet reverence. It wasn't just Jace anymore, now others were arriving early. Students from all over campus. A wrestler who'd lost her scholarship. A sophomore track star struggling with burnout. Even an art student with no athletic background but curiosity in his eyes. They weren't coming for a workout. They were coming for something else. Something deeper. And Malcolm? He showed up exactly the same. Black cotton pants, dark long-sleeved shirt, barefoot on the mat, silent until spoken to. Still carrying his mop bucket by day, still invisible to most. But to a growing few, he had become something of a myth. That day, Jace brought something with him, something wrapped in cloth. When the training ended, he approached Malcolm quietly and extended it with both hands. Malcolm unwrapped it slowly. A new black belt, untouched, crisp. Jace said, "You never wear one, so I got you one. Not as a title, as a thank you." Malcolm looked at it, then at the young man who now stood taller not from strength but humility. He handed it back. "I don't need a belt to know what I've earned." Jace held his gaze. "Then keep it as a symbol of what you've given me, of who you helped me become." Malcolm nodded once and placed the belt down, not to wear, but to keep. Then he said softly, "If you ever teach others, don't teach them to fight. Teach them to listen." Later that week, Rivera called a school assembly in the gym. He had a surprise for everyone. With a microphone in hand and the bleachers full of students, he introduced Malcolm not as a janitor, but as the keynote speaker. Many looked confused. A few whispered. Then Malcolm stepped onto the floor, alone, no mop in hand, just himself. And he spoke about balance, about pain, about the violence of silence and the power of listening. Not everyone clapped, but everyone listened. In the back, Jace sat quietly, eyes on his teacher. He had learned the most important lesson of all. Some of the strongest people wear no belts, and some of the wisest ones carry brooms.